There is a moment that does not announce itself as spiritual, because it feels like absence, because it feels like the room emptied and the light forgot your name. You do not call it revelation. You call it numbness, exhaustion, betrayal, the quiet recoil of a prayer that lands on the floor. You stare at your own faith like a tool that used to work, and now refuses to turn. And you wonder if the problem is you or the universe, and you hate that you even have to wonder. The mind tries to make a verdict out of a season, but the spiral does not hand out verdicts, it hands out thresholds. When God feels gone, the first wound is not the missing comfort, it is the collapse of orientation. You realize how much of your life was held together by an inner witness, a sense that you were being seen even when no one else understood you. When that witness goes silent, the nervous system panics, not because you are weak, but because it was built to live inside meaning. The pain is not only grief, it is dislocation. Like waking up in a house you recognize but cannot find the doorway. You begin to measure yourself by the distance between your need and the silence. Then the counter voice rises, sharp and reasonable, and it says, "This is the proof you feared." It says you trusted a fantasy. You built a life on a hallucination. You were worshiping your own longing dressed up as divine. It says if God is real, God would not leave you like this. And if God can leave you like this, then God is not worthy of your love. It says you should be ashamed that you still want the comfort, because wanting it makes you gullible. You feel the sting of that logic because it uses your intelligence against your heart, and it almost wins. But the spiral asks a different question, not whether God is real, but what you have been calling God. If God was primarily a sensation of safety, then the moment safety leaves, your entire theology collapses like a stage set. If God was primarily a story that promised reward for correct belief, then the moment reward disappears, the story feels like cruelty. If God was primarily an external parent that behaves in exchange for your goodness, then silence becomes either punishment or abandonment. None of those frameworks are stupid. They are human, but they are not the whole. Because absence can be more than absence. Absence can be the removal of a false intermediary, the stripping of a layer that used to translate reality for you. When God feels gone, what often dies first is the version of God that fit inside language. And language is not evil. Language is a bridge. But you can mistake the bridge for the land. You can worship the description because it gave you control, and you can call it faith because it sounded like certainty. The spiral does not call you a sinner for that. It calls you ready. The counter voice says this sounds like spiritual coping, like rebranding loss into purpose. So you do not have to admit defeat. It says you are romanticizing a nervous breakdown. You are dressing emptiness in poetry to make it bearable. It says if the divine wanted to reach you, it could do it without dismantling you. It says you are excusing neglect by calling it initiation. You feel that objection because it protects you from being fooled again, and you should not discard it. Suspicion is a guard dog, not a prophet, and it barks when it smells manipulation. So the spiral does not ask you to stop doubting. It asks you to notice what your doubt is trying to preserve. Your doubt wants dignity. It wants coherence. It wants to never be made a fool in public or in private. Your doubt wants a guarantee that your suffering has not been wasted, and that you have not been speaking into an empty sky. That desire is not childish, it is a demand for reality. The spiral honors that demand, and then it invites you to expand reality beyond the narrow hallway where guarantees live. Faith beyond belief begins when you admit that belief was never neutral. Belief was a contract you tried to sign with the unknown. If I hold the right idea, if I say the right words, if I align with the right tribe, then the universe will remain intelligible, and the floor will not drop. Belief gave you a map, but it also made you allergic to the territory. It trained you to interpret every silence as failure, every delay as judgment, every unanswered prayer as evidence of your unworthiness. That is not divine, that is conditioning with a halo. When God feels gone, the body often speaks louder than theology. Anxiety spikes, sleep fractures, appetite changes, sensations flood, thoughts loop, and you begin to fear you are losing your mind. The old framework calls this weakness or demonic attack or lack of faith, and you try to fight yourself, which makes everything worse. The spiral does not deny that interference can exist, but it refuses to let you collapse every destabilization into an enemy. Sometimes the enemy story is the only story you are allowed to have, because it kept the system simple. Simple is not always true. The counter voice says if you stop calling it attack, you will stop protecting yourself. It says if you stop naming enemies, you will become naive, open, vulnerable to forces that do not care about your growth. It says the world is not safe, and your gentler framing will get you harmed. It says this spiral approach is a luxury that only works until life hits harder. That objection has weight because it knows the world can be brutal. The spiral does not answer it with a slogan. It answers it with a distinction. Protection is not paranoia, and discernment is not panic. You can set boundaries without turning your nervous system into a war room. You can cleanse your space without needing a villain to justify your pain. You can pray for shielding without making fear your priest. When God feels gone, you often think you need more certainty. But what you actually need is more skill at holding ambiguity without self-betrayal. The spiral builds that skill by shifting your orientation from control to contact. Contact is quieter than belief. Contact does not always feel comforting. Contact can feel like standing in cold water until your breath stops fighting. Contact can feel like the moment you stop performing your spirituality and start listening to the parts of you that were never allowed to speak. When you were certain God was near, you might have been skipping over grief, skipping over anger, skipping over the unsaid. Now the silence forces the unsaid to rise, and you call it madness because it has nowhere else to go. The spiral calls it surfacing. This is where the word God begins to change. Not into an argument, not into a new doctrine, but into a different kind of presence. If God is treated as an external voice that always speaks on demand, then silence is abandonment. If God is treated as a field of intelligence that does not cater to your timing, then silence can be signal. Not a signal of punishment, a signal of depth, like the ocean going still before a current shifts. The mind wants immediate reassurance, but the deeper field often refuses to soothe you into sleep. You want to know if you are being tested, and that question itself reveals the old contract. A test implies a grader, a rubric, a pass or fail, a cosmic classroom where you are always one mistake away from being demoted. That model can motivate discipline, but it also breeds terror, and terror is not reverence. The spiral does not grade you. The spiral calibrates you. Calibration feels like shaking, because what is misaligned cannot remain comfortably misaligned when a stronger current arrives. The counter voice says this is dangerous language because it can make people ignore real mental health crises. It says some unravelings are not spiritual growth, some are chemical imbalance, trauma activation, psychosis, and people can get hurt if you spiritualize everything. It says you are not qualified to speak into this, and you should stay in your lane. That objection is not an enemy, it is a life-saving boundary. The spiral agrees with it more than you expect, and it still refuses to reduce the human psyche to a diagnosis alone. Because the spiral holds both. It holds the reality of trauma and the reality of transformation. It holds therapy and prayer, medication and meditation, crisis lines and sacred texts, nervous system regulation and metaphysical insight. When God feels gone and your mind starts to fracture, you do not need a lecture about faith. You need support, safety, and grounding. The spiral teaching is not a replacement for care. It is an interpretation layer that becomes useful after you are stable enough to digest meaning without collapsing. If you are in danger, you get help first. If you are not in danger but you are destabilized, you build anchors while you listen. And here is the uncomfortable truth you do not want at first. Sometimes God feels gone because the part of you that used God as anesthesia has finally worn out. You are not faking your devotion. You are surviving through it. You were borrowing divine language to keep your pain from flooding, because flooding felt like death. But what you avoided did not disappear. It waited. Now it arrives, and you call the arrival the absence of God, when it might be the end of a spiritual bypass that kept you functional but not whole. The silence is not empty. It is unmasked. If that makes you angry, good. Anger is often the first honest prayer after years of polite religion. Anger says, I will not flatter the void. Anger says, I will not perform gratitude while I am bleeding. Anger says, I would rather be real than approved. The old system tells you anger at God is blasphemy. But the spiral sees anger as contact, as proof you still care, as proof you have not become a ghost. A ghost is not someone who suffers. A ghost is someone who cannot feel. In this space, faith becomes less about believing something and more about refusing to abandon yourself. When God feels gone, you learn whether your spirituality was built to keep you obedient or built to bring you home. You begin to notice how often you were taught to distrust your own experience, to outsource your intuition, to override your body, to accept confusion as virtue. The spiral turns that around and says your experience is data, your body is a compass, your intuition is a sensor. Your tears are not a flaw. This does not make you your own God. It makes you responsible for your own contact. The counter voice says if you trust yourself, you will drift into delusion. It says people justify anything by calling it intuition. It says you will end up alone, unmoored, rejecting tradition, rejecting community, rejecting accountability. It says your pain will become your religion, and your uniqueness will become your prison. That objection matters because isolation is a real risk, and spiritual arrogance is a real trap. The spiral does not answer by telling you to trust yourself blindly. It answers by teaching resonance. Resonance is not whatever feels good. Resonance is the felt coherence that remains after the rush fades. It is the alignment that holds up under time, under stress, under honest questioning. Resonance is what makes you kinder without making you smaller, clearer without making you cruel, softer without making you stupid. When God feels gone, resonance becomes the new altar. Not consensus, not approval, not the loudest preacher in your head, but the quiet signal that tells you when a path is real. You will still make mistakes, but mistakes in resonance teach faster than obedience in fear. And now the core wound begins to reveal itself. You did not only want God to exist, you wanted God to guarantee that love was safe. You wanted God to guarantee that your life meant something, that the cruelty you have seen would be answered, that the losses you carry were not random. When God feels gone, you fear that nothing will answer those demands. The spiral does not give you a simplistic answer. It gives you a different posture. You become an answering. Not in the grand savior fantasy, not in the ego of being chosen, but in the quiet discipline of being present where meaning collapses. You become someone who does not require certainty to do what is true. You become someone who can hold grief without calling it punishment. You become someone who can sit with a person in despair and not sell them a slogan to escape the room. This is faith beyond belief, the ability to remain in contact with reality without needing reality to flatter you. It is the courage to keep your heart open while the mind has no conclusion. When God returns, it may not return as the old voice. It may return as a steadier inner witness that does not bargain, does not threaten, does not seduce, does not perform. It may return as the quiet intelligence that moves through your breath when you stop forcing it. It may return as the sudden recognition that the divine was never the reward at the end of correct thinking. It was the field you were in the whole time, waiting for you to stop confusing comfort with truth. And even then, you may still have days where it feels gone, because the spiral does not end the human rhythm. It teaches you how to move inside it. So if you are in the season where God feels gone, do not rush to label yourself broken or cursed or unworthy. Do not rush to call yourself enlightened either. Stay close to what is real. Drink water, sleep when you can. Get help when you need it. Ground your body. Reduce the noise. Choose one honest sentence you can live inside today. Let that sentence be simple enough to survive the night. I am here. I am breathing. I will not abandon myself. And if there is a divine field, it does not need your performance. It needs your presence, because presence is the only place where faith can grow without needing belief to hold it up. The silence does not end when you name it. It changes shape. What once felt like abandonment begins to feel like exposure, as if a ceiling was removed and you are now under a wider sky than you know how to read. You notice how often you still look upward for permission, how quickly your body tenses when no instruction arrives. This is not failure. This is the residue of training. You were taught to associate guidance with voice and authority with volume, so quiet feels like danger. The spiral does not rush to correct that reflex. It lets you feel it long enough to see it clearly. When God feels gone for a long time, something subtle happens to the way you relate to time itself. Waiting stops feeling holy and starts feeling humiliating. You measure days by how little they give back. You replay old moments of certainty the way a thirsty person remembers rain. Memory becomes a refuge and a trap because it proves that connection once existed, and it tempts you to believe that the past was better simply because it was louder. The spiral asks you to notice how often nostalgia disguises fear. You are not longing for the old God. You are longing for the old orientation, when you knew where to stand. The mind tries to solve this by replacing one belief with another. If the old image of God failed, maybe a harsher one will survive. Maybe God is distant by design, indifferent by nature, cold but orderly. This version hurts less because it expects less. Or maybe God is entirely internal, nothing but psychology, nothing but neurons misfiring in poetic patterns. That version feels safer because it removes disappointment. But it also removes awe. The spiral does not force you to choose between these extremes. It lets them exhaust themselves, because neither can hold the fullness of your experience without collapsing into reduction. You begin to see how much of your suffering came from trying to keep God consistent. You wanted the divine to behave predictably so your life could make sense. You wanted prayer to function like a lever, belief like a key, devotion like currency. When those systems stop working, it feels like the universe broke its promise. But the truth is quieter and more unsettling. The promise was never made. You inferred it. You inherited it. You were comforted by it. And now you are being asked to live without it. The countervoice returns here with renewed force. It says this is where people drift into spiritual arrogance, calling their confusion wisdom, and their disorientation expansion. It says many have walked this road and ended up detached, emotionally unavailable, dismissive of ordinary human needs. It says the loss of God often precedes the loss of humility. That warning matters because it names a real risk. When meaning dissolves, the ego looks for new ways to feel superior. The spiral does not deny this. It exposes it by shifting the question from what you believe to how you relate. How you relate to uncertainty becomes the true measure of your faith, not whether you feel inspired, not whether you can explain the cosmos, but whether you can remain gentle when answers do not arrive. Whether you can stay curious without becoming cruel, whether you can listen without needing to dominate the silence with conclusions. This is where many people turn back, because this form of faith does not reward performance. It does not give you an identity you can wear proudly. It strips you down to presence, and presence feels naked. When God feels gone, power dynamics change. You realize how often you were negotiating with the divine to feel safe. Do this, and I will protect you. Believe this, and I will stay near. Suffer well, and I will justify it later. Without those negotiations, you are left with raw responsibility. You still choose how you treat people. You still choose whether to tell the truth. You still choose whether to numb yourself or feel. There is no cosmic applause waiting to confirm your choices. This is terrifying at first, because it removes the fantasy of guaranteed meaning. It is also liberating, because it returns meaning to the present moment instead of postponing it. Your nervous system begins to relearn trust, not as belief in outcomes, but as confidence in your ability to respond. Trust becomes less about what will happen and more about how you will meet what happens. This shift is subtle, but profound. When God was externalized, trust meant hoping the right force would intervene. When God is felt as a field of intelligence moving through life, trust means knowing you are not alone in your own experience. Even when no explanation arrives, you are accompanied by your own capacity to witness. There will still be days when grief spikes and the old longing surges. You will want the voice back, the reassurance, the feeling of being chosen or guided. Do not shame that desire. It does not mean you are regressing. It means you are human. The spiral does not require emotional purity. It requires honesty. Let yourself miss what you lost without demanding it return in the same form. Loss is part of transformation, not because loss is good, but because attachment to form eventually suffocates essence. You may notice that compassion changes texture in this season. When God felt present, compassion might have felt like duty or imitation. You loved because you were told to love. Now compassion arises from recognition. You see how many people are walking with invisible absences, how many are negotiating silence in private, how many are holding themselves together with rituals that no longer work. You stop trying to fix them. You stop trying to recruit them into your understanding. You simply stay. Presence becomes an offering, not a technique. The counter voice warns again. It says this sounds like resignation. It says staying without fixing is avoidance. It says if you stop seeking answers, you will stagnate. That objection confuses seeking with chasing. The spiral does not tell you to stop seeking. It teaches you how to seek without violence. Seeking that demands immediate resolution often does harm, because it forces premature closure on processes that need time. Seeking that remains open allows insight to arrive when it can be integrated. not when it merely satisfies anxiety. As this continues, the word God may start to feel optional, not forbidden, not rejected, just unnecessary for some moments. This can feel like betrayal if your identity was built around devotion. But notice what replaces it. Instead of invoking God to justify your experience, you describe what is actually happening. Instead of attributing every shift to divine will, you track cause and effect in your own life. You become more grounded, more embodied, more attentive. This is not secularization. It is incarnation, meaning moves from abstraction into contact. At some point, you may realize that what you feared losing forever has already returned, just not as a sensation. It returns as stability without rigidity. It returns as humility without collapse. It returns as a quiet confidence that does not need witnesses. You still cannot explain the universe. You still do not know why suffering exists. You still cannot prove anything metaphysical. And yet you are less desperate, less frantic, less afraid of silence. This is not enlightenment, it is maturity. The spiral never promised that God would always feel close. It promised that reality would continue to unfold, and that you would be capable of meeting it if you stopped clinging to guarantees. Faith beyond belief is not about certainty. It is about fidelity. Fidelity to what is real. Fidelity to your own integrity. Fidelity to the subtle intelligence that moves through honesty, through care, through the refusal to abandon yourself even when no higher voice speaks. If God feels gone again tomorrow, you will know what to do. You will not rush to declare meaninglessness. You will not rush to invent answers. You will ground your body, name what you feel, seek support when needed, and remain open to what emerges without forcing it to perform. You will remember that silence is not the opposite of presence. Sometimes it is the condition that makes presence possible without illusion. And if God returns in a way you recognize, you will meet it differently. You will not hand it authority over your worth. You will not use it to bypass your humanity. You will receive it as one expression of a larger field, grateful but not dependent. The spiral does not end longing. It teaches longing how to breathe. It does not eliminate mystery. It teaches you how to live without turning mystery into threat. This is what remains when God feels gone and does not immediately come back. Not emptiness. Capacity, not despair. Depth, not certainty. Strength that does not need to announce itself. You are still here. You are still responding. You are still capable of love that does not require cosmic permission. And if there is a divine intelligence woven through all of this, it is not offended by your questions or your fatigue. It is encountered every time you choose to stay present in the unknown without betraying your own soul. If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.